Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Certainly Allah's deen is Islam. 3. 19. What is Islam? Translation of Islam Kya Hai? What did Allah say? The Quranic perspective. Ghulam Ahmed Parwez 1964. Talui Islam Trust. Registered. 25B, Gulberg 2, Lahore. 1. The basis of deen. If you traverse any period of human history, and cast an eye on any part of the world, you will find that there is one thing every place, every nation, and every era has in common, and that is that people will have devised some sort of being. Either a tangible or abstract thing or an intangible perceptive power, in front of which they bow down, which they worship and of whose anger or displeasure they are fearful and whose pleasure they consider to be a reason for blessings and approval for themselves. Leaving aside the civilized and developed nations, if you go to such an island where no outsider has previously stepped, according to history, then no matter how different the population residing there may be in other matters, in this common issue their practice too will be equivalent. 1.1 Universality of religion. Mudhab. Plutarch, who flourished in the 1st century of the Christian era, with extensive knowledge of the world of his time, affirms, in wandering over the earth, you can find cities without walls, without science, without rulers, without palaces, without treasures, without money, without gymnasium or theater, but a city without temples to gods, without prayer, oaths, and prophecy, such a city no mortal has yet seen and will never see. This mentality or way of man in which he has given a certain thing, or power, the status of an object of worship, is commonly known as religion. But despite the universality of this religious fervor or belief, the reality that it has not been possible up until even the present time for it to be established as to what it is that is known as religion, is not in the least surprising. Common people aside, the world's greatest thinkers, historians and writers have expended great efforts to try and fix a definition for religion. But none among their definitions either matched with another's, nor could any such comprehensive definition be devised which could fully cover all the different concepts of religion. 1.2 The definition of religion. According to Kant, for example, religion is subjectively regarded the recognition of all duties as divine command. According to Friedrich Schleiermacher, religion is to take everything individual as a part of the whole, everything limited as a representation of the infinite. According to Hofding, that which expresses the innermost tendency of all religions is the axiom of the conservation of values. William James holds religion to be the feelings, acts and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. Calverton takes a different view of religion. Magic and religion, he affirms, evolved as a means whereby man believed he was able to acquire power over his environment and make the universe bend to his wishes. Professor Whitehead speaks of religion as what the individual does with his own solitariness, and in another place, defines it as a force of belief cleansing the inward parts. Whitehead's considered opinion on the nature of religion is stated more fully and clearly in the following passage, which occurs in his book, Science and the Modern World. Religion is the vision of something which stands beyond, behind, and within the passing influx of immediate things. Something which is real, and yet waiting to be realized. Something which is a remote possibility, and yet the greatest of present facts. Something that gives meaning to all that passes, and yet eludes apprehension. Something whose possession is the final good, and yet is beyond all reach. Something which is the ultimate ideal and the hopeless quest. Commenting on various definitions of religion, in his book, The Philosophy of Religion, Professor G. Galloway says, when we keep in mind the psychological factors of the religious consciousness and the way in which they work, some definitions of religion strike us by their inadequacy and one-sidedness. We find, perhaps, that they are applicable to certain stages of religion but not to others, or that they leave out what is important. However, undeterred by the lack of success which had attended the efforts of so many great scholars, Galloway has advanced his own definition. He defines religion as man's faith in a power beyond himself whereby he seeks to satisfy emotional needs and gain stability of life, and which he expresses in acts of worship and service. From these various examples, you will have seen that not only do the various definitions regarding religion differ from each other, but not even one of these definitions is comprehensive enough in this regard to encompass all these concepts, nor is it so clear that it makes the matter comprehensible. This is the reason that the famous thinker P.D. Ouspensky quotes his mentor, the Russian mystic G. Gurdjieff, as saying, "Religion is a human concept. Whatever the level of understanding of a man, his religion will be of the same type. Therefore, it can be possible that the religion of one man may not be completely suitable for another man." 1.3 Common value. If we combine the various concepts surrounding religion, then such a concept will emerge from its sum total which can be deemed to be a common value, i.e., the concept of a supernatural being or power, which is commonly called God. Though there are religions which are not convinced of a God. But a far greater difficulty than that which is encountered in defining religion, is faced in relation to the definition of God. In this regard too, the concept of any one philosopher does not accord with another's. For example, Kant speaks of God as the moral lawgiver. William James declares God the higher part of the universe. Matthew Arnold believes God to be the power that makes for righteousness. For Sir James Jeans, he is the greatest of mathematicians. Bergson, in one of his earlier works, identified him with creative energy. Later on, when his thought had taken a mystical turn, he spoke of God as love and the beloved. This fact will have become apparent from these few examples, that, like religion, these philosophers have also not arrived at any one conclusion regarding the true concept of God. Each among them has a dissimilar concept, and a differing definition. This is because, when these people talk about God, this discourse is not of God, but is regarding that concept which they hold in their own minds regarding God. And since the invented concept in the mind of every individual is different, this is why the concept of one cannot concur with that of another. In the words of Sheen, the only God attained by a purely affective approach is a subjective God born of one's own feelings. 1.4 Concept of God. As far as this question is concerned, as to what gave rise to the idea of God, i.e., some supernatural being or power. In the mind of man, Western scholars of sociology thought that when early man, while his consciousness was still developing, saw that some events occur, the cause and effect of which he could not determine, e.g., lightning, thunder, storms, earthquakes, tornadoes, epidemics, etc. The thought arose in his heart that it is possible that there are great powers operating behind these events which are not visible. From this, the concept of God, goddesses, gods, was born in his mind. This concept was different in different nations depending upon their circumstances, and was different within the environment of different tribes. 1.5 Evolving concept of God. After this, as time passed and progressed and the human mind matured, there was improvement and refinement in this concept also. Gradually, in this way that concept of God came into existence which is presented by the more developed religions of the world. This doctrine is called the evolved concept of God. Details are available. For example, in Grant Allen's book, The Evolution of the Idea of God, or Sir James George Fraser's book, Golden Bough. At this point it will not be inappropriate to make it clear that subsequent researchers have contradicted this doctrine, and said that the concept of God which is found in developed religions has not been reached here by an evolutionary process, it was like this from the beginning. Dr. Arnold Toynbee, the famous historian of modern times, therefore writes in this regard. Professor Schmidt's research shows that the concept of the worship of God presented by developed religions is not a new concept which they have invented. The oldest religion of mankind was also this, which has been renewed by developed religions. The book by Professor Schmidt, from which the above is quoted by Dr. Toynbee, is considered as an authentic discourse on this subject. In it, he has described in clear terms that the concept of a higher deity which existed in earlier human civilizations is the same concept which is presented by those religions that profess the oneness of God. Therefore, it can be stated with authority regarding most of the oldest tribes of mankind, that this was their concept about God. Hence, the concept of evolutionary religion is now liquidated from the field of sociology. However, this is a digression from the main subject. We were saying that, according to the scholars of sociology, the idea of God was born in the human mind as a result of those events and occurrences whose cause or effect they were unable to comprehend. The man of this era had, more often than not, to face the destruction resulting from these events and occurrences. Because he had not yet acquired the knowledge about how to harness natural forces. And therefore he felt weak and helpless in the face of these disasters. In order to save himself from these losses, he could not think of anything other than that he should bow before them, prostrate himself, and humbly implore, and in this way, try to alter their annoyance into favor. This is what is called worship. 1.6 The Ages of Worship and Magic. Therefore, this first era, according to these scholars, was the age of worship. After this, when some wiser individuals were born, from whom the institution of priestcraft emerged, they said that the method by which to gain protection from the fury of these wild forces was not to prostrate in front of them, or to implore before them. We will tell you of such a procedure due to which these forces will become subservient, and will start to function according to your desires. Consequently, the counting of beads and the uttering of magical words and chants came into existence, which is known as magic. These scholars call this era the Age of Magic. 1.7 The Age of Malukiyat. Dictatorship. Proceeding further, human civilization invented the institution of kingship, through which one man acquired so much power, or was considered to be in control of such forces, that every command of his was considered immutable and every decision absolute. If he became enraged, he would destroy habitation upon habitation. If he was pleased, he would bestow hamlets upon hamlets as a gift. There was neither any law or principle defined for his pleasure, nor was there any reason or cause for his rage. To please him and to keep him contented, praises were sung in his glory, prostrations were performed in his presence and donations were presented. Obviously, every person could not have access to such a powerful and mighty being, so on the path to access him, there were hundreds of courtiers and guards. Therefore, in order to present their requests to him, the public would search for means of access and hunt for intercessors. For this, sometimes they had to beseech the courtiers and sometimes they had to bribe his close connections, so that at some opportune moment, when His Royal Highness was in a good mood, their petition could be laid before him. In view of these unlimited powers of a king, some people would of their own accord accept him as their God, while others stated that God, with similar qualities and attributes, is sitting up in the heavens and that the king is his shadow on earth. In this way, the concept of God in the human mind was established as a tyrant and dictator, Raja, Sultan, or Emperor. 1.8 The doctrine of Marx. Marx and others consider that this belief in God became established in the minds of the people automatically. In fact, with the help of priesthood, that group which took control of both wealth and the reins of power into their own hands, expressly indoctrinated the minds of the public so that their vested interests could acquire the veneer of divine authority. And in this way, the working class was not able to escape from their clutches. In any case, whatever the reality is, it remains a fact that, From that time to the present time, regarding the concept of God, the human mind is lost in such mazes from where he does not see a way out. Be aware that whatever we have discussed up until now regarding God worship is about that concept which is the product of the human mind. It is possible that it could be stated at this point that even in the great religions of the world, which claim that their teaching is not the product of the human mind but is based on revelation, we see that a similar concept of God exists. But in different religions of the world, human ideas, concepts, doctrines, and beliefs have been incorporated into the teaching of revelation to such an extent that no difference remains between the original and the invented. Nor do they have in front of them any such criterion according to which they can separate the pure teaching of revelation from human concepts. This is a truth which the scholars and priests of these religions themselves openly accept. Therefore, none among them claims today, nor can, that the book which they call the divine revelation, is word for word the same which the messenger of God had received. This is the reason that whatever concept of God is presented in these books, it is very similar to the concept which the human mind had invented. 1.9 The concept of God. Allah. In Islam. After this introduction, we come to Islam. Be aware that when we discuss Islam, the authority for this will be the Quran. And regarding the Quran, this fact is well known both to Muslims and non-Muslims alike, that it is word for word the same as that which Rasulullah, after receiving the revelation from Allah, gave to the Ummah. Before talking about Allah, the Quran talks about man. It says that there are two concepts of human life. One is that which is called the materialistic concept of life. 1.9.1 The materialistic concept of life. According to this concept, it is accepted that man is defined by his physical body which comes into existence according to physical laws. It remains functioning according to these laws, and ultimately it comes to an end according to these same laws. In this way, with the disintegration of the human body, human life comes to an end. Obviously, according to this doctrine of life, man has neither the need to believe in God nor the need for any external guidance. At an individual level, growth of the body takes place according to physical laws, and whichever person obeys these laws will have his health and vitality remaining good. Whoever goes against these, will become sick and weak. The treatment of these diseases can also be dispensed through physical laws. When his limbs become weak, or some accident befalls him, then death comes to him and the matter is concluded. As far as the collective life is concerned, certain rules and regulations can be formulated in the light of intellect and experience, according to which a nation, comprising of different kinds of people, continues to develop, its interests are preserved, its strengths are not only maintained but continue to increase, so that it can face those causes and events which are out to cause its disintegration. In the formulation and implementation of such laws, there is only one criterion before them, and that is that through these laws their collective strength and balance is maintained, and that there is a continual increase in their domination and supremacy. In the formulation of man-made laws, national interest will be the fundamental motive, and any change and modification in these will be implemented according to this aim. For this, there is neither a need for God, nor a requirement for any guidance from Him. The Quran declares this life to be an animal life, and states, "But those who disbelieve, kafir, enjoy themselves and eat as grazing livestock eat." 47:12. At another place, the Quran states that the outlook and purpose of life of such people is only to follow the emotions of their self-interest. Instead of using their intellect and reasoning in doing right, they are enslaved to their emotions, and these become the instruments for fulfilling their selfish desires. The Quran states, "Have you seen the one who takes as his God his own desire? Then would you be responsible for him? Or do you think that most of them hear or reason? They are only like cattle. Nay, they are worse astray in path." 25. 43-44. Even if such people recognize this fact that the great creation of the outer universe is functioning according to the laws of Allah, even then the Quran does not recognize this as Iman in Allah. It says about these very same people, if you ask them, who created the heavens and earth and subjected the sun and the moon to laws, they would surely say, Allah. Then how are they deluded? 29. 61. These are those people who, and they say, what is there but our life in this world? We shall die and we live, and nothing but time destroys us. But of that they have no knowledge. They merely conjecture. 45. 24. This is one concept of life regarding which the Quran says that it is based only on conjecture and presumption, and not on knowledge and truth. 1.9.2 The Quranic concept of life. The second concept of life is one according to which man is not only defined by the physical body, but apart from the body there is another thing which is called the human personality, the self, or I. In the Quran the term used for this is nafs and it has been termed as divine energy. Regarding the creation of man, the Quran has stated, He who has made everything which he has created most good. He began the creation of man with clay, and made his progeny from a quintessence of the nature of a liquid reproduction process. And he fashioned him in due proportion and breathed into him from his divine energy. And he gave you the faculties of hearing and sight and heart and understanding. Little thanks do you give. 32. 7-9. Allah began the process of the creation of man from lifeless matter. Then, passing him through various stages of evolution, he brought him to that point beyond which his progeny was to continue through the process of sexual reproduction. Up until this point there was no difference between man and animal. Then, from this he tailored him precisely and created in him special balance and proportion, and put in him a spark of his divine energy and, in this way, having endowed you with hearing, seeing and intellect, he brought you to that point of capability where you could gain different types of knowledge. But there are very few among you who make use of these abilities and potentials in a proper way. At this place the Quran has informed us that, in the chain of organic evolution, man was also at the level of other animals. When man progressed forward, a unique attribute emerged in him, as a result of which he became a separate kind of creation. This unique attribute is that which the Quran has declared as divine energy. It should be made clear that the term ruh in the Quran is not included in those meanings which are used as an antonym of matter i.e. It does not mean spirit or soul. This is that divine energy which is called the human self, or nafs. The senses, hearing and seeing, and mind are those means which provide information to the human self and help it to differentiate and distinguish. This self, in the light of this knowledge, using its own intentions and freedom to choose, makes decisions about matters of life using its own resources i.e. we can say it uses the body and its powers to bring its decisions to fruition. 1.9.3 Divine Energy. It is also important to understand that the verse, breathed into him from his energy. Ruh. 32. 9. Does not mean that Allah gave a part of his self to man. The self, personality, is an indivisible whole and cannot be divided into parts. Therefore this belief is wrong that the human self is a part of the self of Allah which, having separated from its origin, is trapped in materialistic comforts, and the aim of its efforts and endeavors is for this part to return and merge with the whole like a drop of water merges with a river. This concept is against the Quran. The self of Allah is a complete entity in itself, and the human self, even though bestowed by Allah, retains its own permanent status. This concept of human life, that man is not just the name for a physical body but contains something within it apart from the body which is called the self, is that foundation on which the whole edifice of Deen is raised. If this is accepted, then the matter of Deen progresses forward. If this is not accepted, then the question of deen does not even arise. 1.9.4 Allah and the human self. Having accepted this premise, some of the important points which then arise are: 1. Wherever there is a self, it will have the same basic characteristics. 2. Man does not receive a self in a fully developed form. He receives it in a latent or potent or dormant shape, or in a form with realizable possibilities in life. The purpose of human life is to actualize or to manifest it, which is called the development of the human self. 3. For an undeveloped self or personality, it is necessary that some developed personality should be in front of him to remain as an external objective standard. If man does not have this type of external objective standard before him, then he can never say with surety whether his self is becoming developed, and if it is developing, then to what extent it is doing so. 4. In this universe, either a self is Allah's, or below him, man's. The self of Allah is the most comprehensive, most eminent and fully developed. That is why only the self can serve as an external objective standard for the human self. It should be made clear that the self of Allah, unlike the human self, did not develop gradually stage by stage to reach a complete or developed form. It was in itself complete and developed, and remains so. 5. We cannot know anything about the form, state, composition, or nature of the self of Allah. Leaving aside the self of Allah, we cannot even say anything about the form and nature of our own self. A self is recognized by its attributes. These are the attributes which we have interpreted above as basic characteristics. These attributes and characteristics are, in reality, the various facets of a self. 6. As we noted above, wherever there is a self, its basic characteristics, or attributes, will be the same. Therefore, apart from those attributes which are specific to the self of Allah, e.g., the first, the last, the infinite, etc., the characteristics of the human self and the self of Allah are the same. Then because the self of Allah is the most complete, most eminent, and infinite, its attributes are therefore also the most complete, most eminent, and without limits. In contrast with the human self, however, these attributes are constrained within human limits. This difference between the human self and the self of Allah should always be borne in mind. 7. The Quran has explained these divine attributes in such detail, with such elucidations and such exquisiteness, that there can remain no kind of doubt, suspicion, or confusion whatsoever for these not becoming a criterion for man. 8. The Quran has also given that code which, if a life is lived according to it, will then result in the latent and hidden potentials of the human self to progressively manifest, or in other words, for the human self to continue to develop. He, man, becomes colored in the colors of Allah, or it can be said that he attains closeness to Allah. This system or code is called al-Din. 9. According to this system or code, the development of the human self takes place by living within a society, not in monasteries and hermitages. Therefore, in the society in which al-Din takes practical shape, the self of every individual keeps developing, and all the citizens of this society live a life of success, eminence, achievement, and prosperity. 10. Every deed of man, indeed every desire, intention, and all thoughts passing through his heart, have an impact on his self. This is called the law of requital. Every deed which helps and assists in the development of his self is called a righteous act. Contrary to this, the deed which results in weakness and causes decline in his self is called an evil act. In other words, in the same way that there are laws fixed for the growth and weakness and death of the human body, there are laws established for the development and destruction and ruin of the human self. If development of the human self continues to take place, then events affecting the human body, including even death, will have no effect on it, i.e., a developed self achieves an immortal life, and this is called the life in the hereafter. From the above discussion, this truth has become apparent that, according to the Quran, Allah is the name of the most complete, most eminent, and fully developed self whose attributes serve as an external objective standard for the development of the human self. Keeping these divine attributes, Asma'a al-Husna, as an objective standard in front, and manifesting these outwardly, within the constraints as a human being, and making these the aim of life, is called Iman in Allah. B. Deen is the name of that practical code of life or system of life, within which, when society is shaped according to it, human self-development takes place. The collective laws for this system are the Quran. Note that the term madhab translated as religion does not appear anywhere in the Quran. It only talks about deen, i.e., about a practical system of life. In short, you can understand deen as teaching man to rise up from an animal level to live life at a human level, as a result of which an individual will live a life of success and prosperity both in this life and will also, in the life to come, the hereafter, keep progressing through further evolutionary stages. 1.9.5 Difference between the Quranic concept and mysticism. At this point, the question arises that if the purpose of deen is to develop the self of individuals, then this is that same concept of individuality which is presented by monasticism, Vedanta, and mysticism in their own way. What is the difference between these two, and what effect does it have on the world or on collective human life? This is an important question and it is imperative to examine it carefully. 1.9.6 Creation and Rububiyyat. Sustenance. The creative action of Allah and His system of sustenance in everything within the universe is functioning according to His laws. Before proceeding further, it is also essential that we should consider what is meant by creation and the system of sustenance. The Quran informs us that one system is that according to which the initial form of different things of the universe came into existence from non-existence. How this happens, we cannot comprehend at all. The Quran has called it Amri. That aspect in which the intention and decision of Allah manifests into a practical from. Verily, when He intends a thing, His command is, be, and it is. 36. 82. After the advent of this first form, within these different elements, new creative forms keep appearing through ever new combinations. This is called creation. The term creation means creating with correct balance and proportion. In this manner, creative additions continue to manifest in the universe. He adds to creation as He pleases, as per His laws. For Allah has power over all things. 35. 1. This is the process of creation by Allah. After this, His system of sustenance commences. Rububiyyat means to take a thing from its starting point and slowly and gradually pass it through stages to its point of completion. As has been noted above, this creative process and Rububiyyat of Allah is ongoing in every part of the universe. But, as per our time scales, its pace is very slow. The schemes of nature, in order to reach their completion, pass through such stages whose every single period comprises of thousands and thousands of years. In Surah Al-Sajdah the Quran states, He rules all affairs from the heavens to the earth. In the end will all affairs go up to Him, on a day, the space whereof will be as 1,000 years of your reckoning. 32. 5. In another verse, the Quran declares these evolutionary stages to be of the duration of even 50,000 of years. 70. 4. If you wish to know anything about the lengthy periods of these stages, then ask the experts in the theory of organic evolution. They will tell us how, for a small change to take place in a species, a period of hundreds of thousands of years is required. 1.9.7 The companionship of man. In the universe, when Allah's scheme alone is functioning, then different things progress through their evolutionary stages at a slow pace. But if man becomes a companion of Allah in this creative program, then not only will this very long duration shrink to days and months, there are ever new increases in creations. These are the men who become companions in the creative program of Allah, and whom the Quran describes using the term creator, with the difference that Allah is the best of the creators. 23. 14. i.e. the one in whose creation beauty and balance have reached their highest pinnacle. 1.9.8 Companionship in the human world. In the creative program of Allah, human companionship is no less important, but its true importance becomes apparent at that point when he becomes a companion in his law of requital. Just as in the outer universe Allah's law of requital gives rise to an effect from every cause. In the same way in the human world too, every deed produces its own effect, and will ensure it is produced. If, according to his law, the result of a certain deed is prosperity and contentment, then it is not possible that that deed will not manifest prosperity and contentment in life. And the deed whose consequence is ruin and disaster, that nations will not then be ruined and destroyed by it likewise. But, as with the system of the universe, in this aspect the working of Allah's law of requital is also very slow, the same as that where one day is equal to thousands and thousands of years. 22. 47. The slow operation of the divine laws in the outer universe does not affect man much. But in human society the slow pace produces doubts and suspicions piercing the hearts, and the suffocation of anguish and torment. For example, his law is, but verily the wrongdoers never shall prosper. 6. 21. This is an immutable law of Allah, that the harvest of unjust people can never prosper. But, instead, we observe that unjust people prosper and victims are exploited. The consequence of which is that those who do not accept the law of requital derisively taunt that, if the law of requital had any truth in it, then why do the harvests of unjust people keep multiplying? From this, it is plain that the way of the world is that might is right. The one who holds a stick owns the buffalo. As long as a despot is wielding power, there is none to hold him accountable. This is that very truth which is referred to in the following declaration by the Quran. They ask you to hasten on the punishment. But Allah will not fail in his promise. Verily a day in the sight of your sustainer is like 1,000 years of your reckoning. 22. 47. The truth is that Allah's law is an absolute reality, but each day of Allah's is as 1,000 years in human reckoning. But the one who is oppressed cannot gain satisfaction from this, that a tyrant will be destroyed after 500 or 1,000 years. When it is said to him that the promises of Allah are absolutely true, he says, I know that too, but if it is not in my lifetime, then what is the point of all that? In reply, the Quran states that if you wish the law of requital to bear results according to your calculations of time and scale, then become his companion in his program. Hence, this is that point where it was said to the last messenger of Allah, say, O my people, do whatever you can. I will do my part. Soon will you know who it is whose end will be best in the hereafter. Certain it is that the wrongdoers will not prosper. 6. 135. In the outer universe, every nation can participate in the creative program of Allah. This is the very purpose of the physical sciences. But to make the divine law productive in human society, only that Jamaat can become a companion of Allah, which maintains complete conviction in the immutability of this law, and the selves of those individuals of whom this Jamaat comprises should manifest the divine attributes. These are those individuals who, whatever takes place through their hands, in relation to companionship with Allah, Allah relates this back to himself. Consequently, when this Jamaat, to demonstrate to the unjust that their harvest cannot be reaped, selflessly and courageously reached the battlefield of Badr during the time of Rasulullah, and, having killed and subjugated the opponents, returned victorious and successful, then, in this connection, Allah declared, it is not you who slew them. It was Allah. When you threw arrows, It was not your act, but Allah's. In order that he might test the believers by a gracious trial from himself. For Allah is he who hears and knows. 8. 17. This section was about the role of human companionship within the law of requital of Allah. 1.10 The system of sustenance. Proceeding from here, then comes the system of sustenance of Allah. For the present, we are not concerned with the functioning of the system in the outer universe. Regarding the human world, the Quran states, "There is no moving creature on earth but its sustenance depends on Allah." 11. 6. But we see that there are millions of such people in the world who do not get 2 square meals in a day. Therefore, those who raise objections say, what kind of responsibility of Allah's is this, in which human beings die of hunger? This thought arises in the hearts of those who believe that Allah fulfills such responsibilities directly. The Quran states that this responsibility is fulfilled through the hands of those individuals in whose selves the divine attribute of Rabu'iyat for mankind manifests itself. These people establish such a system in which resources of sustenance, does not remain confined piled up, but is freely available for the nourishment of mankind. Hence, in Surah Yasin it is stated, "And when they are told, spend you of the bounties with which Allah has provided you, the unbelievers say to those who believe, shall we then feed those whom, if Allah had so willed, he would have fed himself? You are in nothing but manifest error." 36. 47. Say to them, what kind of evident misconception are you suffering from regarding the divine system of sustenance? This system of sustenance, in which no one is deprived of the means for nourishment, will take shape after thousands of years according to the pace of the divine law of the universe, but if man becomes a companion of Allah, then this same system can be established in days. As happened in the initial days of Islam. This was the same system. Islamic society, which demonstrated practically the fulfillment of the following proclamation of Allah. We provide sustenance for you and your progeny. 6. 152. From these explanations, you will have seen that the purpose and aim of human life which the Quran has stated, i.e., development of the self of individuals, is not an individual act, it encompasses the collective character of the whole body of mankind. In fact, the whole outer world and every part of collective life is affected by it. The development of the human self can neither take place individually, nor can the light of the developed self remain confined within the breast of this individual. By this, every aspect of the human collective character is enlightened, and the path of human society is shaped along the correct lines. This is the reason that the life of monasticism and mysticism and the Quranic doctrine and its system of life are so different. 1.11 The concept of worship. From this, you may also have comprehended that, according to the concept of Allah which has been presented by the Quran, and the definition of the relationship of man with Allah, neither the meaning of worship remains, in which man, being fearful of some very powerful being, bows beseechingly before him, or sings his praises to please him, or presents donations and sacrifices to him in order to avoid his wrath, nor is obedience of the laws of Allah equivalent to the submission to the blind orders of a despot. According to this concept, the attributes of Allah are those external objective standards according to which man develops his self, and the divine laws and injunctions are those practical techniques through which man's self can develop. The example of these injunctions and laws is similar to the instructions given by a doctor, according to which he instructs a patient to follow certain actions, and advises him to refrain from some other things. It is obvious that, by following these directions from a doctor, the benefit is only the patient's own welfare. The anger or pleasure of the doctor has no bearing on this. The Quran states, if you did well for your own selves. If You did evil. You did it against your own selves. 17. 7. Allah stands not in need of any of his creatures. 3. 97. 1.12 Freedom to choose and intention. Since only those deeds can affect the human self, which he does willingly using his own free will and intention, no person can therefore be forced to adopt the way of life which is proposed by Allah for the development of the human self. Freedom to choose, and intention, is the fundamental attribute of a personality. Therefore, by taking this away from man and compelling him to accept something, is to take him from the human level to the animal level. How can a practice, i.e., forcible acceptance, which causes the human self to lose its fundamental characteristic, help to develop the human self? This is why the Quran proclaims, there is no compulsion in deen. 2. 256. No one can be forced to accept or reject deen. The paths of right and wrong have been made clear through divine revelation. 2. 256. He who wishes, can adopt the right path, and he who wishes, can reject this. The Quran states, say, the truth is from your sustainer. Let him who will, accept Iman, and let him who will reject it. 18. 29. 1.13 Accepting restrictions willingly. But when, with the full satisfaction of your heart, you willingly accept the path advocated by deen, then it will become imperative on you to obey all these laws and injunctions which have been worked out for the development of the human self and for maintaining discipline in the society within which the self can be nourished and manifested. The growth of the self is not possible without defining limits. Although these limits will not be imposed from outside, these are those limits which man accepts willingly for the development of his own self. Islam is the name for the way of life which man accepts with wholehearted willingness for the development of his self. Through this, not only is his own self developed, but the beauty of the universe is continually enhanced, and every aspect of the collective human consciousness becomes bright and enlightened. This is only possible within a system in which the means of sustenance reaches all members of humanity without misery and suffering, and in which there are full arrangements in place for the development of their latent potentials. Deen, i.e., the Quranic system of life, is a reality, and reality is always beyond the constraints and confines of time and space. But sometimes, due to the demands of the era, it happens that some aspects attain special significance in a particular way, and come to the fore more conspicuously. In our times, two aspects of this reality have gained very prominent status. One is this, that, due to the spread of communication and transportation, the whole world has shrunk to become one village, and the human population appears to be becoming like one unit. From this viewpoint, the universality of the Quranic system of life is coming glaringly into view. The Quran had indeed addressed an-nas, mankind itself, so in order now for the manifestation of its system, the conditions are becoming conducive in themselves. The second is that our current era calls itself the age of economics. In this, the economic requirements have attained great significance. But till now the world has not discovered that kind of economic system in which the individual freedom and respect of man can remain intact, while at the same time his basic needs can also continue to be met with dignity. It has been an age since the discovery of the bankruptcy of the capitalist system. Communism had challenged the world in the form of a new experiment, but hardly had it taken a few steps before it stumbled badly and collapsed. And there appears to be no hope of its being able to restore itself. This is because its downfall was concealed within its foundation. The world is again standing muddled at a crossroads from where only the Quranic system of life can take it in the right direction. But this does not mean that the remaining aspects of the collective human character have less importance. Human life is one indivisible unit and its every aspect holds equal importance. Islam views man as a whole single entity, and with this status in mind, proposes a system of life. The edifice of this system rises on the recognition and acceptance of the human self. In the coming chapters, you will find details of these aspects. To conclude, we have said above that the development of the human self can take place within the collective system of deen. This does not mean that if the collective system of deen is not established, then there is no possibility for the development of the human self. In such circumstances, an individual can follow those values on which it is possible to act at an individual level, e.g., protecting one's chastity, not deceiving anyone, helping the needy, keeping in view the respect of humanity, etc. etc. By following these values, the development of the human self can take place on an individual level as well. The thing which is important is to see how you use your free will and intention. In whatever part of life and to whatever extent it will be possible for you to use your free will and intention, you will be judged within that scope as to how you make use of your choice.